favoring the emails of the various quackademics and charlatans of the climate research field, which is something that was invented out of whole cloth, right? We used to have meteorologists, oceanographers, geologists, right? These are long-standing specialties. Climate research, the majority of people in that field are quackademics because the field itself has been designed a priori. Remember, Al Gore, Ozone Man, during the period from 1993 to 2001, he was the head of this Reinventing Government Commission in the Clinton administration. And what Al Gore did systematically, one of his main pursuits during the 8 years that he was vice president, when he was not out, getting money from foreign countries to run campaigns and all the other shenanigans that Al Gore engaged in, he was purging competent scientists from the U.S. government. If you were not green, if you were not Malthusian, if you were not an environmentalist fanatic, if you had any character or any scientific scruples or real criteria, you were out. And they got a quackademic, a charlatan, to come in. And this is now reflected, even though these emails, a lot of them have, almost all of them have to do with the East Anglia Climate Research Unit. We've got people in there, for example, Eugene Wall of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Paleoclimatology Program. Now, I'm reading these off because these are the ones we want probed. We want a congressional investigation. We want a special prosecutor. We want the FBI sicked on these characters because their project is genocide. Remember, we've talked about it. If you pass this cap-and-trade lunatic monstrosity, you will at least double the export price of food, meaning wheat above all, but also corn, to some extent rice, to some extent perhaps even sugar. But wheat, corn, rice, they will double. And we know from the FAO in their moments of lucidity, the Food and Agricultural Organization, we now have 1 billion people on the verge of starvation in sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and some of the poorer areas of Latin America. The Russian harvest came in at 103 million tons, which is good, but basically if the U.S. price doubles, hundreds of millions will die. That's the issue. That is why this is so important. At the Nuremberg trials, there was developed the concept Schreibtischtäter, the people who perpetrate crimes from behind a desk. And in this case, these quackademics are the ones. So Eugene Wall of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Paleoclimatology Program is one of the emails on the receiving end from Jones. Casper Amann of the National Center for Atmospheric Research, Climate and Global Dynamics Division. So Jones says, try to change the received date. Don't give those skeptics something to amuse themselves with. Well, why don't we go and find out whether these two U.S. government officials falsified the emails by changing the received date? Now, Mr. Mann over there in Britain has been asked, what about all this? He says, I won't dignify that question with a response. This is the oligarch, the eternal oligarch, in this case the left-ogarch, because that's what a lot of these people are. It's really a right-wing imperialist mindset, but it's the oligarchs. Now, the one that we should look at perhaps the most, the NASA Goddard, the Goddard Space Flight Center at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, a huge nest of quackademics, charlatans, hoaxsters, and so forth. That's got to be probed. Now, if you think about this, I've mentioned a number of times before, the obvious comparison is Nazi race science. There are a lot of people in the world who said, well, the debate about racial inferiority and racial superiority is over. The U.S. agrees, Germany agrees, all the scientific community agrees that some races are inferior and some are superior. It took a world war, really, to defeat that and to make it so smelly and so repulsive and so discredited that you couldn't come forth and embrace that in public. Think about these other hoaxes. Remember Piltdown Man, I think, was one of them. The Cardiff Giant. Think about all these these things, right? Teilhard de Chardin was involved in one of these hoaxes where they find fossils. These Malthusians have attempted to create a block universe, a prison house of the human mind, where industry, science, and technology, the main allies and tools of humanity in the constant struggle against backwardness, disease, poverty, scarcity, malnutrition, starvation, and genocide. These are taboo because you're going to be hurting the polar bears and the snail darters and the glaciers on the ice caps. If you think about the idea of defining carbon dioxide exhaled by human beings all the time as a poison, as a pollutant, you've gotten to the essential standpoint of the radical environmentalist movement, which is people pollute. People pollute. Humanity is a cancer on the planet. We see this, for example, in John Holdren. John Holdren in the Obama White House, if he's not willing to immediately repudiate all of this carbon footprint garbage, should be fired. He should be impeached. The Congress can impeach him. He can be cut off, and so forth for the rest of these people. So the net result of this is that Copenhagen must fail. Copenhagen must fail big time, all the more so because Obama has now invested his personal prestige and his breathless personal presence. He obviously wants to bring out an army of 200,000 lemmings. Maybe the 200,000 German lemmings from Berlin can get on the railroad and ride up there across the belt and try to be shock troops, right? Maybe that's his idea. So Copenhagen must fail. Now remember, this Ivo de Boer, Yvodeboer, Ivo de Boer is the top European Union honcho, the Eurocrat, who's been shepherding. He's the main Sherpa for the climate change agreement. Now, there will be no official climate change agreement because China and India have said no. But we know that there's been a secret meeting of Obama with this de Boer character at the White House, which undoubtedly has to do with secret protocols and backroom protocols for this Copenhagen monstrosity. In other words, they won't be able to have a binding treaty that will be deliberated and signed or initialed by the 180 or 190 countries. But what they may well do is to have secret protocols that will be signed behind the scenes, right? Things that they're not going to make public, which will be considered binding in the National Security Council and the British mechanisms and so forth. So this is also now the crisis of the U.S. Democratic Party reaches a new level. Because remember, Obama came in saying, oh, we're going to restore science to its rightful place. Look at what they call science. Quackademics, charlatans, people who ought to be in jail for obstruction of justice, withholding information, people whose contempt for the public, for the masses, could not be more oligarchical and more complete. Big problem for the Democratic Party, for those House Democrats. Now that we know that global warming is a fraud that never was by land or sea, it's a complete cult, it's a complete expression of oligarchical hysteria and hatred of humanity with a genocidal goal. I think that's the one thing you'll hear here that you don't hear elsewhere. The goal of this is genocide in the third world. Let me point out interesting article here. Xinhua news agency on the 24th of November. Beware of unspoken intention of Western climate change diplomacy, and it is to securitize everything and to stop the development of the third world. So, no toleration for myths, for crackpots, quackademics, charlatans, and all the rest. The global warming fraud has been exposed, at least the anthropogenic part of it, and therefore we won't be needing those genocidal measures that will cause poverty in the U.S. and hundreds of millions of deaths, particularly in Africa. And therefore we say, once again, happy Thanksgiving weekend and see you next week.